drove all the way, and it wasn't a bad drive, it was a really nice drive, the way we went.
Did you walk by?
I wouldn't mind driving it again, going back the way we did.
Yeah, well, hopefully we don't get some rain pretty soon, it may come to that. But yeah, I saw that, that's welcome for sure. Harder it is to handle. So fortunate to have a nice, cool place to work. Yes.
See how this works. All right. All right. Got a couple of minutes before we go live here.
Good morning, how are y'all? Moving slow, but I'm still moving.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good, how are you?
Great.
Did you find it?
Haven't showed up in the office, I've been in some house and in the back.
Well, maybe. Kroger's has got a M&M ice cream sandwich. And Rebecca's saying, grab an M&M ice cream sandwich for your family today.
Oh, okay.
That's what Rebecca said.
All this paper. Calendar and all that. I got today's bulletin.
Snake walking over beside that cauliflower, isn't it?
Are you seeing
Good, how are you doing? Oh my goodness. You look at all.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, how about you? Yes, I do.
Check our church's Facebook page and my personal Facebook page to make sure we're not live. I'm streaming live about so there's a lot of people that are not gonna be here.
Mhm.
Check that old button. No, it's not. If you go to the community one first, so. Yeah, there it is. Now, see if you could share that to the group one, which I don't know if you could because be an admin on that.
Might not even giving me the option to do that.
Okay, all right, well, don't worry about it. It'll work out. Anybody that's gonna, they'll know. And then my personal one is
It's on that group.
Okay, great. Great. All right. Give me a drink of coffee. Oh, me too. Well, I every morning I have to basically clear my throat from all the stuff. I understand that. And if I mow my yard, just count me out for the rest of the day.
The rest of the week on me. That's one reason I didn't come to VBS, because I couldn't take calls.
Yeah.
It's like, people don't think I'm sick.
Mm-hmm. We're all judging you.
I would be judged.
Well, if y'all want to turn over in your Bibles to Judges chapter 13 this morning, that's where we're going to be. Mainly 13, 14, 15, 16. I am actually streaming live this morning. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be out, and we're streaming live our worship services this morning, so I thought it would be good to attempt to try to do a Bible class as well, because I know a lot of people are either having to be quarantined or home with people that are quarantined, and I thought it would be wise to at least offer that for everyone. So I'm attempting to do that, and I hope that it sounds good. I've got this microphone plugged in, and it should pick up just every little thing that happens, so I think it'll work out just fine. Well, we have been studying. It feels like it's been like a month before we've been in this classroom, and a month since we've been studying Joshua Judges Ruth. But it hasn't been. It's only been 2 weeks since the last time we studied something out of here. With our vacation Bible school going on, it just kind of broke a little bit of that up. But that's okay. We are doing a lesson entitled Into the Land. And it is a survey of Joshua Judges Ruth. And so we're not doing it chronologically as we go through the text, but more of picking out key things that we want to study as we go through those 3 books. Now, the book of Ruth, we'll spend a little bit more time in it because it is 4 chapters and it is a story. And it's like if I was to leave out part of that story, then you wouldn't get the whole thing. So we'll probably do the whole text there and learn each lesson that's found in the book of Ruth. So I'm excited to be able to do that with you. So this morning we're actually in Judges 13, but just remember how Israel had this terrible spiral of doing evil. And starting in Judges chapter 2, there's a fantastic little summary of the whole thing. And the way that I look at it, and I wrote this down in my Bible, is if you look at chapter 2, it says, "Now the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I brought you out of Egypt and led you into the land which I have sworn to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And as for you, you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, and you shall tear down all their altars. but you have not obeyed me. And this is what you have done. And so that sets this great stage. Can you imagine if the Lord, it's almost like when your parent says, I'm about to come back there, you know, and then they show up, or I'm gonna come up there and you're getting a whooping, you know. Well, here is the Lord saying, okay, that's it. I'm coming down there and I'm going to talk to these people face to face and I'm going to tell them what's happened. I've made this covenant with you. I promised that I would never break it, but you have disobeyed me. You've disobeyed me. And here's what you have done. And so the way that I have outlined this in my Bible is you can start to see, what did Israel do? Well, verse number 2, they disobeyed God. They did not obey him at all. And then you see more about what Israel did in chapter 2, verse 10. All that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord. That's another thing, they did not know, nor the work which he had done in Israel. And verse 11 tells us what they did. The sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals, and they forsook the Lord and the God of their fathers who brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods. Do you see this pattern here? They did evil, they forsook the Lord, they followed other gods. 3 great points right there from verses 11 and 12. Then another one. Another point, they provoked the Lord to anger, and they forsook the Lord and served the Baal and the Asheroth. Then you see in verse 14 what the Lord did. See this pattern? The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he gave them into the hands of the plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the land of their enemies. And then the hand of the Lord, verse 15, was against them for evil. Then verse 16, the Lord raised up judges who delivered them from the hands of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, and they played the harlot and after other gods, and bowed themselves down to them, and they turned aside quickly from the way in which their fathers had walked. So again, what they did, what the Lord did, what Israel did. Now again, what the Lord did. Verse 18. The Lord raised up judges for them. Again, the Lord was the judge and delivered them from the land of the enemies and all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning because of those who oppressed and afflicted them. So the Lord had compassion upon them. Well, then what did Israel do? Verse 19. And it came about when the judge died that they would turn back and act more corruptly than their fathers. And so it wasn't, here's this pattern. You've heard people talk about the book of Judges and how it's a cycle. Well, chapter 2 gives us that cycle. What the Israelites did, what the Lord did. What the Israelites did, what the Lord did. And it's just this terrible cycle that goes along, on and on and on. Verse 20, what the Lord did. So the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. And so they are just in this terrible cycle. Verse 23, the Lord allowed those nations to remain, not driving them out quickly, and he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. So that's the summary of what's happened, and you see that all throughout the book. And so when you look at the whole book of Judges, you see all these different ones that come up, and I've got in my Bible. I have a fantastic little timeline of the Judges. 1406, Israel entered into the promised land, and then Othniel is the next judge, Ehud, Deborah and Barak, and then Gideon, Abimelech, Jephthah, and then Samuel is born, and then Samson, and then you see, after that, Samson, no more judges, and then Saul becomes king in 1050, and then David becomes king in 1010. And so just a whole list of all these judges that go through this cycle that Israel has to deal with. So now we get to the story of Samson, and it's just a wonderful story, and it's absolutely one of my most favorite, and probably one that we teach the most to our children in in small Bible classes. But I thought it would be good for us to spend a little bit more time right there and talk a little bit about the winner of the Weakest, Strongest Man contest. Okay? Now, I don't know if you've ever watched any of those Strongest Man contests, competitions on TV, but I'm always impressed with the things that they can do. The idea that they can take, these tires and flip them over and over and over again and just move them great distances, just impressive. And then, I've seen where they'll take like these logs even. Have you seen these logs that they'll pick up and carry? Or these big discs, and they have to take the disc and then place them up on top of something else, and they have to do it over and over and over again. It's amazing. I picture Samson as being one of those big guys like that. He's just massive. But at the same time, while he may have been able to win the strongest man contest, he was also the weakest man, the weakest. And we're going to see how that's the case as we go through this. So, we've all been amazed by reading the story of Samson and thrilled by his demonstrations of raw power and really manliness that's recorded in the book of Judges. But yet at the same time, he is one of the weakest. So what did Samson look like? Well, honestly, we really have no clue. In my mind, I picture him as being massive, strongest man, But we have to use our imagination just a little bit. Maybe he's, pictured as, wide shoulders and ripping muscles, legged like oak trees. I don't know. Just a massive of a person. But honestly, little is known about him except that he's just a strong man, and he was able to accomplish great things. But the problem is that Samson was spiritually weak. Samson was spiritually weak. I want us to look through and just read some of the text, and I hope that you'll read along with us as we go through this. So, starting in chapter 13, I want you to see this again. Notice this phrase. Now the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And so that phraseology right there, they did evil in the sight of the Lord, is found all throughout the book of Judges. And it's just more and more of a problem that they have to face. So it says there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had borne no children. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink or eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. And then she begins to tell him exactly what we already have read of what he just said to her. Well, I want you to notice this, and this is something you're probably very familiar with. Verse number 7 gives us a description of what he is supposed to be like. Not verse 7, verse 5, sorry. It says, For you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God. In other words, he's going to be dedicated to God. And that's exactly how he was. From the womb, someone else may be dedicated to God, become a Nazarite, and even take the Nazarite vow later on in their life. But he was to be this way from the very beginning of his life. And it says that he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. And this word deliver is very, very important, because this word deliver means that he is to judge them. He is to be somebody that's going to command them, that's going to bring them out of this situation that they're in. And that is a key word. That word deliver I don't know if I've circled it every time. Yeah, gosh, here's a great one right here. Chapter 10, starting in verse 11. It says, "The Lord said to the sons of Israel, did I not deliver you from the Egyptians and the Amorites and the sons of Ammon and the Philistines? Also when the Sidonians and the Amalekites and the Mahoanites oppressed you, you cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hands. Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will no longer deliver you. Go cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in the time of your distress." The sons of Israel said to the Lord, "We have sinned to do to us whatever seems good to you. Only please deliver us this day." So this phrase, it's all throughout the book of Judges, and I have gone through my text and circled every single time the word deliver is found in the text. And it is just riddled throughout here. From chapter 6, 7, 8 it's found, 9 it's found one time, and then that big conglomerate of it in chapter 10. It is not found in chapter 11, but then chapter 12 it shows up. And then here again in chapter 13 when he's talking specifically about Samson being somebody that's going to deliver them. So the idea again is that cycle. Remember that cycle that the Israelites go through where they they do what is evil in the sight of the Lord delivers them out, they do what is right for a while, and then they turn away, and then they need someone to deliver them all over again. And that deliverer was always that judge that came up. So that is the birth story, I guess you could say, of Samson, and how he came about from the very beginning of his life. He was to be dedicated to God in a special way, specifically to be a deliverer of the people away from the Philistines. And that's exactly what he does all the way to the very end of his life. And matter of fact, his life ends because he's delivering them out of that land. All right, so then chapter 14, Samson is going to get married. So Samson went down, verse 1, to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. There's a big problem right there. He's marrying the enemy. You know, he falls for the enemy, and that's a problem. So verse 2, it says, "So he came back and told his father and mother, I saw one woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife." Then his father and his mother said to him, "Is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people that you can go take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines?" Why would you go over there and take a wife from this enemy people, this unclean people, the people that are not of God? Take one of our relatives, or take people that are from among us, and have her become your wife. But Samson said to his father, "Go get her for me, for she looks good to me." Boy, I'm telling you, that's the story of life right there. She looks good to me, you know? And he thinks, that's what I want. And isn't it odd to say, I don't know, in our culture we would think that that's odd, to say to your parents, "Hey, I'm telling you, woo, I got the hots for this girl right over here, and I want you to go get her for me." And can you imagine being the dad and walking up to this girl and say, "Listen, my son has got the hots for you, and he wants to be with you. He wants to be your husband." That wouldn't work in our culture very well, would it? Not at all. That would be awkward to do that. Well, that's what's going on here with Samson and his parents and his wife. So let's see here. Where was I? She looks good. However, his father and his mother did not know that it was of the Lord, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Now at the time the Philistines were ruling over Israel. Remember, they should have driven them out, and they didn't do it. And because of that, right now the Philistines have the power over Israel, and they're having to face the consequences because of that. Then verse 5, Samson went down to Timnah with his father and his mother, and came as far as the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him with might, so that he tore him as one tears a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. So there is one of the occasions where Samson does something absolutely amazing, something that we would never even think that someone would be able to do. With his bare hands, he just takes this lion and destroys it. But notice how he's able to do this. How is he able to do it? The Spirit of the Lord, right? The Spirit of the Lord is on him. Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, don't you think verse 4 indicates we shouldn't be too quick to blame Samson for what he's doing there?
Yeah, certainly, because really it's all in the scheme of God, right? Absolutely. Here's the point that I guess you could make with this, and I think it's a good one, is sometimes the Lord uses some of our bad decisions to carry out his good will. And that's the case right here. This is a bad decision that he's making, but God can still take that bad decision that you've made and do some good with it. And isn't that a great message of hope for us? And so when you're facing those times in your life where it's like, man, I don't know how, I know I've made mistakes and there's no hope for me. No, God can even take something that you've done and carry out his will. And God did this all throughout Israel's history. It was one bad decision after another, and really it's all in the scheme of God, his plan to execute for the redemption of man. It all plays in. The puzzle pieces perfectly fit together. Absolutely.
I'm just trying to remember how many times.
She had her hand up behind you. Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you're reading the part about Samson was supposed to be a Nazarite from
Yeah.
his birth, and how, I mean, there's other accounts of people choosing to become
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah.
Nazarite. And so he was basically just told
Mm.
when he got big enough
Yeah.
that this is what you're supposed to do. Like,
Yeah.
it was just put upon him. It's not something that he chose.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of wondering if maybe that kind of played into some of his spiritual weakness.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I know that there's been times when, like, something is just happening.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't choose this. I
Yeah.
don't want this to
Yeah.
be happening, but here it is. God gave it to me to deal with.
Yeah.
And, like, I might be kind of rebellious against that
Sure.
or whatever. And so
Yeah.
those have been some spiritually weak times. So I wonder if, as he's growing up, like, because there's things that he can't do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, he can't have certain things.
Right.
And so I wonder if there's a little bit of rebellion against this. Like, I didn't ask for this.
Yeah, and what you're playing into is the psychology behind who he is and what he's having to deal with in his life. So, he didn't choose this. This is just something that was told to him, and so that certainly would influence, decisions that he makes and how he views the world. Everybody else has chosen what they want to do around him, and he's like, well, this is just my life and I don't have much of a choice. Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, go ahead.
I'm kind of repeating what's been said, but it looks like from the beginning, God set this thing in motion.
Oh, absolutely.
He knew obviously what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so there's a chance that that decision was influenced by God.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. That's one thing I love about the Old Testament, especially, is you see all these small little events that are happening, and you're like, oh, look how God's hand is there. Look how God's involved here.
Yeah.
And then in our own lives, we see small events and we say, where's God in all of this? And he's still just as present in your life as he was right there. Yeah, that's good. David had something. Yes, sir. It's now your turn, David.
I was trying to think, how many times in Scripture has an angel come
Yeah.
and told the parents, this is, your child's going to be born, this is going to be his purpose?
Mm-hmm.
How many times does that happen in Scripture?
Oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it, but it's
Samson.
several times.
Jesus,
Yeah. Abraham and Sarah.
Abraham,
Yeah.
well, Samuel and Hannah, I don't know. Is that
Well, she was
She decided
she
for him.
yeah. But an angel did come to Hannah and say,
She-
yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
So about 4 times
Yeah.
is all I can think of.
Right.
you know, not a really common experience.
No.
I mean,
No. And
And-
spread it all throughout history,
and
you
you
know.
think of those other three that are not Samson, and what a big deal they were.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about, is it possible that God had a bigger plan for Samson
Yeah.
and he just did not obey?
Yeah.
You know, to
That
have your birth be foretold by an angel and all this other stuff,
yeah.
and then your life turns out like his did, it's kind of sorry.
Yeah, it is. What I do know is that he, you know, the story of Samson really sets such a great example for us on, while we may be physically strong and we think we can accomplish a lot of things in this world and physical things in this world, it really what all boils down to is your spiritual strength. And that's where he was the weakest. You know, he was absolutely spiritually weak. Was not able to, you know, face decisions in his life to stay on track. You know, now in the end, we know, you know, what happens to him, and he carries out the will of God, and it serves as a great example for us. But while we're in it, if you're in that moment, that's when it becomes the toughest. And isn't that the story of our lives? When we're in the moment, we can't see the big picture, but it's afterwards that you look back and you go, oh, look, I see how God was using that situation for his glory. Or how you look back and go, boy, was I ever ignorant and made all these mistakes that I, you know, really shouldn't have done. Yeah. Amazing. All right. Let's see. So he tears up this lion. When he returned later, let's see. He went. Let's see. Let me go. The Spirit of the Lord came in. So he went down and talked to the woman, verse 7 of chapter 14. And he looked, and she looked good to Samson. So here again, another phraseology where she looks good to Samson, you know? And I think that's interesting. So it's all, notice the physicality that's there. She looks good, you know. I see her, she's not good for me, but she looks good, you know. And it's not all about looks. And boy, am I ever thankful that, you know, that's the case, because we know that the scriptures say that God doesn't look at the outward appearance, but he looks at the heart. And if Samson would have been able to learn that, he may have saved him from a lot of trouble in his life. All right, so when he returned later to take her, he turned aside to look at the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the body of the lion. So he scraped the honey into his hands and went on eating as he went. Isn't that just a weird thing? I just think that's so strange. The Bible is so full of strange things, but there it is. That's what happened. I would have never thought, I'm going to go check that dead carcass and see what I can get out of it to eat it. You know, it's just such a strange thing to think. Even if I saw bees and there was honey, I'd be like, yeah, but it's in a dead lion. You know, I don't want that.
Sanitary.
Not sanitary at all. Bill?
Could you imagine how yucky that was?
Oh.
How sticky honey is?
Yeah, exactly.
Weird.
Yeah, all over it. Golly. Unsanitary.
Oh, it's one thing I just have noted, and it may mean nothing, but several times in here it talks about the secrecy.
Oh, yeah,
And I
sure.
wonder if that plays.
Oh,
into
absolutely.
part of his
So I think the
problem.
point that you're making there is that, hey, he didn't even tell his parents, you know, he killed this lion. You know, there's just a lot of things that are just kind of being what we would call, you know, shoved under the rug. I'm not going to mention this. Yeah. Very deceptive. And that a lot of times gets us into trouble,
Well,
you
it
know.
shows he had absolutely no regard for his Nazarite vow.
Mhm.
And he had no regard for the law in general.
Exactly. Okay. Let's see here. I have a note in my notes here. It says, Samson may be one of the weakest characters in the Bible. We talk about him being the strongest man. That's what we teach our kids. Look how strong he is. You know, but he is also one of the weakest. One of the weakest. Just one spiritual struggle after another. It could have been a great time of his life where he was delivering the people of Israel, and he does in a way, but still a problem.
How is it going to make you think? You know, he might have been physically strong, but how mentally strong was it?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
as far as these mistakes he's made.
Yeah.
Good decision.
All right, let's look at chapter 15 real quick. Let's talk a little bit about a few things here. I think I've already mentioned his strength in chapter 14 there, verse 5 and 6, where he kills this lion. Chapter 15, verses 4 and 5, we see he caught 300 foxes and he tied them together with firebrands on their tails and turned them loose in a field of grain of the Philistines. That would be interesting. We actually saw a fox this morning on the way to church. They're, to me, one of the most fascinating creatures anyway. But I can't imagine catching 300 foxes. It is foxes, right? It's not fox-eye or foxen. Because that would make sense, because ox becomes oxen. English. Yeah, but it's foxes, right? Well, he tied them together and he sets them through. Then in chapter 15, verses 14 through 16, he broke ropes that were binding him, and he killed thousands of Israel's enemies with the jawbone of a donkey. Let's look at those verses, verses 14 through 16. It says, when he came to Leah, the Philistines shouted as they met him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Again, he's around these dead carcasses. Fresh jawbone. And so he reached out and he took it and he killed 1,000 men with it. Wow. And then he says this, verse 16, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. I'm sure that had to rhyme probably in the Hebrew language, right? It just sounds like a good poem to rhyme. But just amazing to think about. So the Philistines tried to stifle him. They tried to keep him down. They thought, we'll bind him up. They put these ropes around him. But he is able to break through that. And when he does, he takes this jawbone and he kills 1,000. I can't imagine that. In my own personal life. I don't know anybody that's killed 1,000 people. I really don't. But here is this man who takes the jawbone of a donkey. I don't know how long a jawbone of a donkey is. Maybe something like that. I don't know. Not a massive thing, but I don't know if you've been around a donkey. My grandpa used to have a donkey or a mule or something. I guess it was a donkey in his backyard. And I don't know why he had it either. I don't know why anybody really has a donkey, I guess. But anyway, we say they're stubborn, they're hard-working animals, and just their skin, and I don't know if you've ever touched one or not, but, I've put my hands on it, and they're just tough. They're hard, it's like touching metal just about. So I can only imagine he gets this fresh jawbone and is using it to kill 1,000 people. That's who he was. Amazing things. Look at verse 3 of chapter 16. Let's read a little bit more. Let's start in verse 1 now. It says, now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and he went into her. There's another bad decision that he's made. When it was told of the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city, and they kept silent all night, saying, let us wait until the morning light, when we will kill him. Now Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose, and he took hold of the doors of the city gate and the 2 posts, and pulled them up along with the bars. Then he put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the mountain, which is opposite Hebron. It's just amazing to think about this strength that he has. It's absolutely amazing. Now, what is the source of his strength? Is it exercising? Did he go out? Did he work out? Well, no, that's not it. The strength came from the Lord. Let's go back to chapter 13 and remember where this come from. Verses 3 and 5, we've already read this. Chapter 13, verses 3 and 5. His strength comes from the Lord. It says, "Now behold, you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink or eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head. For the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines." His strength comes from God. And so just notice that it's always in the Spirit of the Lord that he's able to do these amazing things. From chapter 14 and verse 6, where he kills that lion. And then if we go over, I think, let me make sure this is right. Chapter 15 and verse 4. I think it says it again, that it's from the Lord. Oh, no, that's just where, let's see where it's at. Well, the verses back there in chapter 13 tells us the reason he's able to do these things is the Lord has been active in his life. It's time after time after time. It's the fact that he's been dedicated to God from the very beginning. He's able to do those things. Even with all these mistakes in his life. And it's just amazing to me. All right. Now, his weakness. Why is he so weak? Well, he likes to display his strength, obviously. You ever known somebody that's like, they're just really a strong person and they can demonstrate it to you? They show you how strong they are. They are able to do amazing things and they let you know that they're able to do those amazing things. He displayed his strength. He was basically a one-man army. To kill 1,000 people with that jawbone, he's a one-man army. Samson is a perfect illustration of Proverbs 16 and verse 18, where it says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling." He couldn't control his temper. He was unable to master himself, and he was guilty of all kinds of fleshly desires. Just gave in over and over and over again. He desired ungodly women. He had a passion for the Philistine women, which was the reason for his downfall, and he did not listen to good advice. He should have listened to his parents and when they said, "Hey, is there not any women right here that you could have?" Listen to your parents. Well, the result is that he is forsaken by God. He lost his strength. Now we know there was a lot of scheming involved. His wife tricked him and cut his hair. He told her that the reason that he was able to be strong is because of the hair that was growing out. And as soon as she figured that out and told everybody else, they cut his hair and he loses all of his strength. The neat thing is that hair grows back. Hair grows back. I mean, for the most part, unless you're going completely bald. But, if you got hair and they can cut it, then it's going to grow back. And so that's the thing, is his strength does come back. So he's forsaken by God. When he loses his strength, he loses his vision. He lost his freedom in chapter 16. But it was not the haircut that really got it. It was the disobedience to God. And that's the spiritual implication there. When we're disobedient to God, we really lose everything. And rejecting God's authority will bring even the strongest man down to his knees. And that's the story of Samson. He's a weak person. But he's also the comeback kid. He's also someone who returns. And it'd be a sad story if it ended here with just this contrast of his weakness and his strength. In the last day of Samson's life, there's this great return. The Philistines have taken him captive. They plucked out his eyes. Okay, they think, well, if we'll take his eyes, then we'll be able to bind him up. And so they tried. They bound him up with chains. And they made him a slave. And he was forced to work as an animal, like an ox. And then his hair returned, though, after they had cut it. And his strength, therefore. And he returns. In verses 23 through 30, let's read this together for the last few minutes of class here. Chapter 16, verses 23 through 30. It says, Now the Lord of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, for they said, Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. And it so happened that when they were in high spirits, that they said, Call for Samson, that he may amuse us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them, and they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me just this time, O God, that I may once be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them, the one on his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he bent with all his might, so that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he killed in his life. Then his brothers and all of his father's household came and took him, brought him up, and buried him between Zorah and Eshthal in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years. So that's the end of the life of Samson, but he was able to do amazing things. I think it's interesting right there. Lord, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time. How many times in your own life have you said, Lord, just let me get through this one. Let me just do this. And if I can just do this, then I'll do this for you. And that's a scary gamble to make with the Lord. It really is. I don't know if it's the right one to do. But I can understand that because I've been that way in my own life. Lord, let me just do this one. Help me get through this, and I will glorify you. Well, Samson does that. He kills all the people, and it ends up killing himself as well in this battle. So it's a situation where he was able to execute exactly what the Lord's will was done.